Ethan Caldwell jolted awake as the alarm crashed into his chest like a blunt strike, and at the same moment, a strange uneasiness slid down his spine, a wordless premonition that today wouldn't resemble any morning in the 52 years he had existed. The pale blue light rising from the Seattle horizon cut a cold line across the bedroom, washing over the face of a man who had climbed from a poor apartment in South Chicago to this dizzying penthouse, a journey paved with blood tears and ruthless determination. Ethan lay still for a few seconds, listening to the echo of his heartbeat in the quiet room, then slowly sat up, brushing a hand over his forehead, feeling as if the entire world was standing at the threshold of a shift only he could sense. He stepped out of bed, his bare feet touching the icy wooden floor, his mind racing through tasks, numbers, and strategies, but only one thing sharpened into focus. Today he had to fly to Denver to close the $1.7 billion deal with Arcadia Tech, a deal capable of redirecting the future of Summit Capital Group. But instead of using his private jet as always, he had chosen to do something the board considered unnecessary. He decided to fly on Northwind Airways, the airline his conglomerate had just acquired, so he could feel firsthand how the system he now carried on his shoulders truly operated. That decision had seemed like a simple strategic choice. He did not yet know that only hours later it would ignite a reform that would shake the entire industry. Ethan walked into the bathroom and turned on the hot water steam, rising like a veil that blurred away the traces of anxiety on his face. Water streamed over the solid shoulders of a man who once worked 2 jobs to pay tuition, a man dismissed countless times before becoming a financial symbol of the West Coast. But this morning, even as his muscles relaxed, his heart stayed quiet. He could not name the feeling, only that it warned of a storm. When he stepped into the dressing room, rows of dark suits stood ready like soldiers awaiting battle. Ethan chose a navy one with a cold edge, fastening each button as though sealing away any softness. His Patek Philippe watch, a gift he had bought himself after reaching his first $100 million in net worth, caught the light reminding him of the path behind him and the battles ahead. As he finished knotting his tie, his phone vibrated. The name on the screen made him pause. Logan. His son rarely called this early. Ethan answered, masking his growing concern. "Son, what's going on?" On the other end came the sound of heavy breathing, then Logan's voice, rough with contained anger. "Dad, it happened again at my company." Ethan closed his eyes, leaning lightly against the desk. "Tell me," Logan explained the meeting from yesterday, how the idea he had spent weeks developing was presented word for word by a white colleague, and when he confronted it, the entire room dismissed him as if he were overreacting. Worse still, an executive floor security guard stopped him, demanding to check his ID because he didn't look like senior staff. "I know what to do," Logan said. "But feeling erased like that, it's hard, Dad." Ethan absorbed every word like a blade drawn across his own chest. He had once stood exactly there. He had once swallowed the same rage just to survive. Son Ethan, said his voice, deepening into something like a vow. "What matters is not how they see you, but that you record everything, every idea, every email, every incident. You build your wall of evidence, and when the moment comes, you strike with it." Logan was silent for a few seconds. "How did you live with this for so many years? I didn't live with it," Ethan replied. "I turned it into fuel." When the call ended, Ethan stared at his reflection. In his eyes burned a fire that had slept for years, now fully awake. He walked into the kitchen and took the hot coffee the machine had brewed at the precise minute, its aroma drifting through the vast room. But his mind narrowed to a single point. Today could not go wrong. Rebecca, his executive assistant, called to confirm the schedule. Ethan answered firmly. Cancel the jet. Book a first-class seat on Northwind under my name. No advance notice to the airline. Rebecca hesitated for a fraction of a second, but understood. Yes, Mr. Caldwell. I'll take care of it. With his leather briefcase in hand, Ethan entered the elevator. Seattle shimmered below through the morning haze. The city was waking up, but inside him, a fierce intuition whispered that more than a new day was beginning. A new era was rising, and he had no idea that within hours this simple choice would push him into the center of a defining crisis. A confrontation not only with a broken system, but with an entire airline culture rotting from its core. But first, he had to board that fated flight, the one where a small seat labeled 2A would become the epicenter of an earthquake. Ethan Caldwell stepped out of the glass tower and into the black sedan waiting at the entrance. And the moment the door closed, the outside world fell into a heavy silence, leaving only the deep breath of a man preparing to face something he himself could not yet foresee. The car eased into the lane toward Seattle-Tacoma Airport, the sky washed in a pale silver gray of early morning, the weak sunlight strangled by thick clouds like a warning of an unpredictable day ahead. Ethan opened his leather briefcase and reviewed the Arcadia Tech deal documents, but his eyes never settled. They rested on each page for only a few seconds before drifting away, as if his mind were pulled by something far stronger. It was the call with Logan. It was the old helplessness rising again, the kind he thought he had buried long ago when he walked into the world of walnut meeting tables, glass boardrooms and contracts, carrying 6 or 7 figures. He had forgotten that the pain had never truly disappeared. It had only quieted when he climbed high enough. The car stopped at the premium passenger gate. The driver opened the door, but Ethan sat still for a few heartbeats before stepping out. A harsh gust of cold wind hit his face like a warning. Seattle felt different this morning, and he sensed it down to the bone. He pulled his carry-on behind him, moving with a mix of controlled calm and simmering alertness. Passing through the glass airport doors, he blended into the rush of travelers, each carrying their own story, their own goals, their own worries. Ethan carried one mission to see the truth, and the truth didn't make him wait. At the TSA security line, the queue stretched endlessly like a tired metal serpent inching forward. Ethan joined the line ID and boarding pass already in hand. But when his turn came, the TSA agent, a white man named Frank Collins in his mid-40s, did not reach out to take his documents. Instead, he looked Ethan up and down, scanning him with a blatant, unjustified scrutiny. "Where are you flying?" Frank asked, voice clipped. "Denver business," Ethan replied evenly. Frank narrowed his eyes. "ID. Stay right where you are." Ethan complied, still composed, though a pulse began to throb at his temple. Ahead of him, 3 white businessmen dressed just like him with suits and leather cases had passed through in 10 seconds. He had already stood here for 2 minutes. Frank examined the ID far too long enough for it to be intentional. Another TSA agent approached. Problem without glancing at Ethan, Frank answered, "Additional screening. Secondary." Those 2 words struck with the weight of steel hitting concrete. Ethan knew this game. He had lived it before. And now, even as the CEO of the conglomerate behind this very airline, it was happening again. He was directed to a separate inspection area, his shoes removed, his belt seized, his watch scanned twice, his laptop opened, swabbed for fingerprints, as though he were a suspect. Frank's gloved hands rummaged through every compartment of his suitcase, as if searching for a crime that did not exist. 12 minutes. 12 minutes of being looked at like a stranger, like someone who did not belong. When he finally gathered his belongings, a quiet voice spoke beside him. Every time. Ethan turned. It was Marcus Avery, the man he had briefly noticed in line, now bending to retrieve his laptop. They never say it, but we all know, Marcus continued with a tired smile. I fly this route for 3 years. Not once have I avoided extra screening. Ethan nodded, feeling as though he was staring into a mirror of his past. They take our time 1 minute at a time, Marcus said without looking up. And eventually we get used to being misjudged. Ethan tightened his grip on the leather handle of his case, feeling a cold, dangerous anger coil in his chest, not the explosive kind, but the kind honed through years of endurance. He walked away from security and into the main concourse. But when he thought things might return to normal, he felt someone watching him. An airport staff member near the passenger assistance kiosk. Another probing look. The same look as Frank. The same look Logan had described just that morning. And Ethan understood something clearly. Some things do not change because you succeed. They do not change because you carry an expensive briefcase or sign million-dollar contracts. The world does not become fair simply because you reached the top. He headed toward the Northwind Airways first-class check-in counter, where an employee named Linda Hart was smiling warmly at the white passenger before him. But when Ethan stepped forward, that smile vanished like a mask slipping off. "What do you need?" Linda asked, her voice cold as steel. "Checking in for flight NW218 to Denver," Ethan said, handing over his boarding pass and ID. Linda looked at him, then at the documents, then at him again, her lips tightening with a hint of displeasure. "And how did you purchase this ticket?" Ethan heard every word, each one intentionally emphasized, directly through the airline's website. "Oh," Linda murmured, not in pleasant surprise, but in thinly veiled suspicion. "Just confirming." She typed slowly, deliberately, as if entering nuclear codes. And in that moment, Ethan realized this trip meant only to check service quality was revealing something far deeper in the culture he was about to either save or dismantle entirely. Linda eventually returned his documents, but as he stepped away, she leaned toward her co-worker. No idea how he got a first-class ticket. Probably points or someone gifted it. A small laugh followed. Ethan closed his eyes for a single second. Just one. And inside him, a tidal wave formed. When he entered the luxurious Northwind lounge, he hoped the atmosphere might be different. But that hope was crushed instantly when a young employee named Kyle stepped in front of him with cautious hostility. "Sorry, this lounge is for premium guests." Ethan handed him the ticket. Kyle examined it as though checking counterfeit currency. "One moment. I need to verify." Ethan felt the weight of surrounding eyes, curious, doubtful, quietly prejudiced, spotlighting him, as though he were stepping onto a stage he had never been permitted to stand on, even though he owned the building that housed that very stage. When Kyle finally nodded and allowed him in, Ethan walked into the elegant lounge carrying a heavy truth. Sometimes the ticket you buy with your own money is worth less than the skin you were born with. And he had no idea that this was only the prelude before a seat labeled 2A would ignite the breaking point that could bring an entire airline to its knees. Ethan stepped into the Northwind Executive Lounge, hoping to find a quiet corner to steady his thoughts. But within only a few steps, he sensed the atmosphere shift, as if an invisible wall had risen between him and the rest of the room. Warm, golden lights washed over perfectly pressed suits, luxury luggage and sleek silver laptops left partly open, yet it was the quick glances, the brief looks away that drowned out every other sound. He sat in a leather chair by the window and tried to focus on the meeting documents, but each line blurred beneath the familiar weight he had carried countless times in the past, the kind of weight he thought he had shed long ago. Only today he was no longer a college kid working night shifts. Today he was the chief executive officer of Summit Capital Group. But to some people that changed nothing at all. A lounge attendant named Carla Monroe approached, her makeup flawless, her smile tight and mechanical. "So this area is reserved for first-class passengers." "I know," Ethan replied, handing over his boarding pass. Carla examined the ticket, as though inspecting a counterfeit bill, her eyes scanning every corner. "Ah, I see," she murmured, her voice dropping but not softening. "First time flying North Wind first class, isn't it?" Ethan took back the ticket and answered slowly. "The first time, but it certainly won't be the last, if my impression improves." Carla's thin smile flickered before she turned away. Ethan assumed the matter was over, but it was not. A group of white businessmen near the bar began whispering their glances, cutting toward him with curiosity tinged with suspicion. One of them chuckled softly, the words slipping through the room like a blade, probably upgraded with points. Ethan drew a deep breath, tamping down the spark of anger. He was not here to argue. He was here to observe, to see the things internal reports would never reveal. Shortly after, a well-dressed, middle-aged man approached. "Mind if I sit here, suit yourself?" Ethan replied, maintaining his composure. "I'm Robert Alden," the man said, extending a hand. "Vice President at Sterling Enterprises." Ethan shook his hand with a polite nod. "Ethan Caldwell." For a moment, Robert's eyes narrowed as if recognizing something. Then he laughed warmly. "Ah, Caldwell of Summit Capital. You're the man behind the North Wind acquisition." Ethan nodded. Robert regarded him with newfound interest. "I read your analysis in Forbes last month. Truly impressive." "I didn't expect to meet you here." Ethan simply offered a modest smile. But the moment Robert sat down, the entire room seemed to shift. Those who had looked at Ethan with doubt now whispered, speculating their earlier disregard evaporating in an instant. A younger man even walked past, deliberately staring again, just to confirm his identity. The change from suspicion to deference happened so quickly it stung deeper than anger. Because it was not real respect. It was recognition of status, not of personhood, not of character. Only of the seat he occupied atop a system many still believed belonged to certain kinds of people. When Ethan stepped away to take a call from his chief financial officer, 2 lounge attendants eyed him anxiously, as though the conversation alone might cause trouble. When he returned, he noticed the lingering glances, the quiet second-guessing of his presence. Just as he was about to sit, Carla approached again. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, voice forced into politeness, though her reluctance seeped through. "We kindly remind guests to keep noise to a minimum in this area." Ethan looked around. 2 men were laughing loudly across the room. At the next table, a group was speaking animatedly, yet he was the only one being warned. "I understand," Ethan said, his tone harder now. "But I believe that reminder should apply evenly." Carla froze for half a second before retreating, her face flushing. The passengers nearby, even those who had silently judged him moments earlier, recognized what had just happened. Still no one spoke up. No one except one woman. A blonde woman in her early 40s with a confident presence walked to the chair across from him. "I'm Emily Warren," she said. "I saw everything. What they're doing is not right." Ethan met her steady gaze and felt a rare sense of relief. Even one voice could make the world feel a little less hostile. "Thank you, but I'm used to it." "That's the problem," Emily replied, her tone sharp, yet empathetic. "You're used to it. They're used to it. And it keeps happening?" Ethan did not answer, because a truth echoed within him. She was right. But he had no time to reflect further before the announcement sounded. "First-class passengers on Northwind, Flight 218 to Denver, please proceed to the gate." Ethan stood and walked toward the boarding area. It seemed the tension might end here, but it did not. It was only guiding him closer to the true explosion, and that explosion carried a name, Seat 2A. As he neared the gate, he saw the woman who held the key to the coming eruption, the gate agent Melissa Crane, smiling brightly at a white passenger and wishing him another wonderful trip just like every week. But when her eyes shifted to Ethan, the smile vanished instantly, as though someone had flipped off a light. "Do you have a boarding pass?" she asked, her tone clipped. A question she hadn't asked a single passenger before him. Ethan handed her the ticket, and the moment Melissa saw the seat printed on it, Seat 2A, Ethan felt it like a tremor running through his entire body. Something was wrong. Something was coming, a warning rising from the depths. Something was waiting for him on that aircraft, waiting to ignite and redefine not only the flight, but the entire future of Northwind Airways. Ethan stepped through the boarding door as though crossing into a low-pressure zone, warning of an approaching storm, and the moment his feet touched the cabin of Northwind, Flight 218, he sensed a shift in the air, a subtle distortion in the flight attendants' expressions, and in the way other passengers glanced at him, with a blend of suspicion and caution. The first-class cabin was spacious, with pale leather seats and soft ambient lighting meant to create the refined atmosphere premium airlines strive for. But that elegance cracked instantly when the lead flight attendant, Samantha Boyd, turned and saw him. Moments earlier, she had greeted each passenger warmly, calling them by name, in a voice polished through years of service. But when her eyes landed on Ethan, the smile on her face broke in half. "Boarding pass," Samantha said, curtly skipping the customary greeting. Ethan handed it to her. She glanced at the ticket, then at him, then at the ticket again, as though trying to force a mismatched puzzle piece into place. "Seat 2A?" she asked, suspicion threading her tone. "Correct," Ethan replied. "First class." Samantha did not answer. She simply jerked her chin toward the front. "Left aisle." Ethan walked forward, drawing in a steady breath, keeping his shoulders firm, even as the familiar weight of unfairness clung to him like an old shadow. Then, reaching the second row, his heart stalled. In his seat 2A sat a middle-aged man wearing a tailored grey suit and a gleaming gold watch, the face of someone accustomed to always being granted priority. The man was not just sitting there. His personal bag occupied the overhead bin space above Ethan's seat, as if he owned the entire area by default. Ethan stopped and said calmly, "Excuse me, my seat is 2A." The man lifted his eyes for half a second, then returned to his tablet, as if Ethan were nothing more than distant background noise. "Impossible. This is my seat." "But my ticket, the man interrupted, emphasizing each word. "I'm Richard Hale. I fly this route every week. Seat 2A is mine." Ethan looked at him, not with anger, but with the clarity of someone who understood the deeper issue. This was not about a seat. It was about who was presumed to belong and who was not. "I will still need to sit in the seat assigned to me," Ethan replied, his voice even but unyielding. Richard sighed as though inconvenienced by something trivial, then motioned for Samantha, like summoning staff in a private club. She hurried over, and Ethan immediately noted the shift in her demeanor. When she addressed Richard, her voice softened noticeably. "What seems to be the issue, Mr. Hale?" "This man," Richard said, nodding toward Ethan with open irritation, "claims 2A is his." Samantha turned to Ethan, her expression hardening her tone, cold as ice. "Sir, are you certain you have a first-class ticket?" Ethan met her gaze. "If I did not, I would not be standing here." Samantha took his boarding pass, checked it, then checked Richard's. And in that moment, her brow furrowed. Both tickets read 2A, a system error. A technical mistake easily resolved with standard and equitable procedure. Yet instead of following protocol, Samantha tightened her grip on the tablet and announced a decision that seemed predetermined. "Mr. Hale is a Platinum Elite customer. Mr. Caldwell, unfortunately, we must ask you to move to economy." The words struck the cabin like a verdict, and the way the entire cabin fell silent proved no one was surprised. They had seen moments like this before. The black passenger pushed aside. The white passenger prioritized. Richard even smiled, tapping his tablet again, as if the matter were efficiently handled. "Good. Thank you, Samantha." Ethan remained standing. He did not yell. He did not slam a fist. He did not raise his voice, but his stillness stretched the air tight, signaling something far more dangerous than anger, signaling resolve. Then a woman's voice rose behind him. "Excuse me, but this is completely wrong." Ethan turned. It was Emily Warren, the woman who had defended him in the lounge. Emily stood fully upright now, facing Samantha and Richard, with eyes burning. "You did not check the timestamp of the bookings. You did not ask who arrived first. You did not offer compensation. You did not even propose a fair alternative for both passengers." Ma'am Samantha snapped. "This is a priority policy for loyal customers. And it does not concern you." "It concerns me," Emily replied without flinching, "because I am sitting here watching you make a choice based solely on who you think looks like a first-class passenger." A ripple of murmurs moved through the cabin. Samantha's face reddened, yet she clung to the sliver of authority she believed she held. "If Mr. Caldwell does not cooperate, I will call the captain." Ethan inhaled slowly, his eyes shifting from endurance to calculation. "I would like to speak with the captain." Samantha clearly disliked the direction of this, but she had no choice. A few seconds later, Captain Douglas Reed appeared, imposing and steady, silver-haired, carrying the posture of a man accustomed to making final decisions. "What is the situation here?" Samantha immediately explained, highlighting the platinum customer and the passenger causing delay. When she finished, the captain turned to Ethan with the measured weight of responsibility, yet lacking true neutrality. "Sir, to maintain our schedule, I kindly ask that you accept an economy seat. We will compensate you afterward." Ethan asked plainly, "If I were the white man in the grey suit, would you be making that request?" The entire cabin froze. Richard swallowed. Samantha looked away. The captain did not answer. And in that silence, Ethan understood everything. "I would like to see Northwind's documented protocol for resolving duplicate seat assignments," Ethan said, "in writing." The captain stiffened, perhaps because the request was too precise, too formal. "That document is not available on the aircraft." Then Ethan replied as he slowly raised his phone, "I will call the person who can provide it." Sir Samantha interjected, uneasy. Now phones must be in airplane mode. "The door is not closed," Ethan said, his tone sharp. "And I need 1 minute." He tapped the contact. The moment the screen lit up with the name Rebecca Executive Office, the captain stared as though realizing something was terribly off. Ethan spoke clearly, each word ringing through the cabin like a bell. "Rebecca, send me all ownership documents for Summit Capital's acquisition of North Wind, including operational authority." The entire cabin fell into a stunning, absolute silence. Several passengers stared open-mouthed. Samantha blinked rapidly. Richard Hale sat upright for the first time, because now they all understood. The man they had tried to force into economy was not a random traveler, not an outsider, not someone beneath priority. He was the top authority in the entire North Wind Airways hierarchy, and Seat 2A had just become the first battlefield of a revolution. Ethan stood tall in the narrow aisle of the first-class cabin, the phone still pressed to his ear as the sharp clicks of Rebecca's keyboard echoed through the speaker, each keystroke hitting like a hammer on the thin barrier separating truth from a system long accustomed to protecting itself with unspoken rules. Captain Douglas Reed stared at Ethan as if reassessing everything he thought he understood about the man before him, while Samantha stood frozen, her face drained of color, as she realized she had crossed a line she should never have touched. "I've sent the documents," Rebecca said, her voice calm but edged with steel. Ethan lowered the phone, opened his email, and in an instant, the words filling the screen changed the entire atmosphere of the cabin. The letter of authority, the board signatures, the acquisition notice for North Wind Airways by Summit Capital Group, all of it lay before him in the hands of the man Samantha had just attempted to push into economy. Ethan turned the screen toward the captain. "My name is Ethan Caldwell," he said, his voice not loud, but striking like thunder. "Chief Executive Officer of Summit Capital Group, the parent company that owns North Wind Airways." The silence that followed shattered like glass. A few passengers gasped. A woman covered her mouth. Richard Hale, who had been sitting in Ethan's seat with the entitlement of someone used to privilege, recoiled for the first time, his face flushing red, his chin trembling like a man jolted awake from a delusion of importance. Samantha's eyes dropped immediately as she stepped backward, shrinking into herself. Captain Reed inhaled sharply the pride he wore moments before, falling from him like dust shaken loose. "Mr. Caldwell," he began, trying to steady his voice. "We had no idea." "Correct," Ethan cut in. "You did not know. And because you did not know, you showed me the clearest version of the service culture this airline is actually operating with." He turned to Samantha, lowering his voice, but sharpening it at the edges. "If I had not revealed who I am, would anything have changed?" Samantha said nothing, not because she lacked an answer, but because she knew the truth would condemn her. Before she could respond, Ground Manager Olivia Brooks rushed into the cabin, breath-quickening eyes wide with shock as she spotted Ethan. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm so sorry we were never informed," good Ethan replied. "If you had been informed, I would not have seen the truth." Olivia bowed her head, gripping her folder, as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the moment. Richard, who moments earlier acted as though Seat 2A was a birthright, now sprang to his feet. "Mr. Caldwell, I truly apologize. I didn't know. Please, the seat is yours." Ethan looked at him, not with hostility, but with a reflection so stark that Richard lowered his gaze. "You sit in 2A every week?" Ethan asked softly. "Oh, yes, I thought you thought a priority was designed to serve you first." Richard flushed as though stripped bare. Ethan shook his head. The problem is not only you. The system taught you to believe that. He turned back to the captain. The real issue is this. At every point of contact today, your staff made decisions based on bias, not policy. One sentence, and the entire cabin seemed to tilt. A man in the row behind whispered, "This is going to hit the news." A woman nodded. This should have changed a long time ago. Captain Reed stood motionless for several seconds, battling between professional pride and the undeniable truth confronting him. Finally, he exhaled. "Mr. Caldwell, we must depart on time. With this incident, I am unsure protocol allows us to proceed." "I know," Ethan said. "That is why you will not depart." Samantha blinked hard. "You mean delay the flight?" "More than delay." Ethan fixed his gaze on the captain. "I am grounding this flight." A wave of shock erupted, a silent explosion. Ground. The entire flight. Impossible. Does he even have the authority? Ethan turned his phone, showing the clause granting full operational authority during the post-acquisition transition period. "I have complete authority." Olivia nodded in affirmation, her voice trembling. "Yes, he does." Captain Reed looked at Ethan, then at Samantha, then at Richard, as if weighing whether to resist the tidal wave or accept it and rebuild what would be washed away. "If we ground the flight," he said quietly, "we must deplane all passengers." "Correct," Ethan said. "And then every employee involved in this incident will join an immediate meeting with me. Not in a private boardroom, right here at this gate. And no one leaves until I understand where this problem begins." Samantha paled. Olivia swallowed hard. Richard stepped back, afraid of being pulled deeper into the storm. But Sir Samantha whispered, "The passengers will be furious." Ethan looked at her, his eyes softening, yet deep with conviction. "If passengers are angry because of a delay, I will accept responsibility. But if they know the truth, they will understand." Then he turned to the captain, his voice solid as steel. "Initiate grounding procedures." Captain Reed straightened, drew in a breath, and gave the first nod of a man who understood that he could no longer shield the rot buried beneath years of routine. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell." As the words left him, silence swept across the first-class cabin, not the silence of shock anymore, but the silence of history, the moment everyone recognized as the beginning of an earthquake. A passenger whispered, "He's really going to do it." Another replied, "No, he's not just doing it. He has to." Ethan looked again at the empty seat. 2A, once a symbol of one-sided privilege, then at the cabin around him. And he knew from this moment forward, it was not just one flight being grounded. An entire system was about to be brought back to Earth and rebuilt from the ground up. The cabin speakers crackled to life, and Captain Douglas Reed's voice boomed through the aircraft, each word dropping with the weight of a tremor beneath the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to internal operational reasons, North Wind Flight 218 will be temporarily delayed. We require all passengers to deplane until further notice." The moment the announcement ended, the cabin erupted into murmurs. Confused glances, furrowed brows, irritated sighs. But amid the rising noise, there was one thing unmistakably clear. No one looked to Samantha for answers. No one questioned the captain. Every eye drifted toward Ethan. They sensed that the decision reshaping the entire flight had originated from the calm, resolute black man standing in the middle of the cabin, like a pillar rooted in the storm. A few passengers recognized him from the news from magazine profiles. A man whispered, "That's Caldwell Ethan, Caldwell Summit Capital." And with that, every rumor solidified into truth. But what struck them more deeply than his reputation was the composure he carried, even as an entire airline's operation trembled around him. Ethan stepped aside to let passengers exit, and one by one they walked past him, each offering a look that mixed curiosity with respect. Some even dipped their heads slightly, a silent gesture that said, "We understand why you did this." Meanwhile, Samantha and the two other flight attendants stood frozen like statues, unsure of their place, now that the authority they once relied on had shrunk to almost nothing. Captain Reed tried to maintain professionalism, though the unease in his posture betrayed him, especially as he glanced at Ethan, as if awaiting the next directive. When the last passenger left the cabin, only 4 people remained: Ethan Captain, Reed Samantha, and Olivia Brooks, the ground operations manager. Olivia broke the silence first with a trembling apology. "Mr. Caldwell, I never imagined. I am so sorry for what happened. I will take full responsibility for reporting everything to upper management." Ethan turned to her, his voice steady but heavy as stone. "You will not shoulder responsibility alone. This was not the action of one person. This is culture." Samantha reacted instantly, driven by instinct rather than clarity. "I did not discriminate. I only followed the Platinum Priority Guidelines." "The guidelines do not instruct you to ignore booking timestamps," Ethan replied. "They do not instruct you to decide who looks like a first-class passenger. They do not instruct you to question the validity of my ticket." Samantha opened her mouth to argue, but then Ethan's gaze settled on her a fraction longer, and whatever defense she had froze in her throat. And most importantly, Ethan continued: "The guidelines do not require you to push a passenger to a lower class because their appearance made you assume they do not belong here." Samantha stepped back. No one had ever spoken to her so plainly. For years, she had told herself that her suspicion toward passengers like Ethan was instinct, a professional intuition. But under the sharp clarity of his words, she was forced to confront the truth. Olivia swallowed, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mr. Caldwell, what do you intend to do next?" Ethan looked around the cabin, the luxurious seats, the polished silver service trays, the soft ambient lights. All mere decoration, covering a deeper flaw built into the system itself. And in that moment, he made a decision the aviation industry would repeat for years to come. "I will not allow this flight to depart," Ethan said. "Not until the entire issue is addressed at its roots." Captain Reed frowned. "You mean today, within a few hours?" "The entire crew will stay here." Ethan's voice cut like steel. "Until we talk, and until all of you understand that service cannot be built on bias." Samantha stared at him, as if she could not believe what she had heard. "You cannot force us." Ethan lifted the email, pointing to the clause granting the Chief Executive Officer of Summit Capital direct authority over Northwind operations during the transition period. "I can, because I have the authority," he said then, after a beat, "and because I have the responsibility." Captain Reed bowed his head slightly. "Then we will attend the meeting." Olivia nodded quickly. "I will prepare a conference room at the gate." But Ethan shook his head. "No, right here." All 3 stared at him. "Here inside the aircraft, yes. This is where the problem occurred, and this is where we will dismantle it." He wiped the table between seats, 2A and 2B, his eyes deep and reflective. "This space is the most honest witness." Each word settled into the air like anchors that would not be moved. While Olivia hurried out to coordinate, Ethan sat down in seat 2. The seat that should have been his from the beginning, while Captain Reed and Samantha sat across from him. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Ethan broke the silence. "I want to hear from each of you. Not to punish you, but to understand what you believed you were doing when you made your choices." Samantha start? Samantha's hands tightened. "I was just acting out of habit." Habit, Ethan asked. Or bias, she could not answer. Captain Reed stepped in, his voice low, almost defeated. "Mr. Caldwell, you are right. What happened today was not a one-time mistake. It reflects how many long-time staff behave because they think they are protecting the first-class experience." But in reality, he paused, staring at the worn hands that had gripped a control yoke for decades. They are protecting an image they have misunderstood. Ethan listened to every word, not just with his ears, but with the lived understanding of someone who had endured this his entire life. "We will change," he said. Samantha lifted her head, surprised to hear the word "we" instead of "you." And change begins with admitting we were wrong. Samantha pressed her lips together. Then, for the first time since meeting him, she spoke without excuses. "I was wrong." Ethan nodded, not as forgiveness, but as acknowledgement of a beginning. Outside the aircraft, passengers gathered in growing numbers, reporters began arriving, and the clicking of cameras signaled a coming media storm. But inside, a strange, profound stillness took hold, the moment when long-standing walls of denial began to crumble to make room for real change. And Ethan knew with absolute clarity that this was only the first tremor. What came next would be far stronger. Rumor traveled faster than sound. Only 10 minutes after Ethan officially grounded the entire flight, the boarding gate area had become the eye of a media storm. Passengers who had just deplaned stood clustered together, whispering, glancing repeatedly toward the aircraft door, as though a public tribunal was about to unfold there. Several had already raised their phones, recording live streaming, and within moments the hashtag #NorthWindFlight28 began flashing across social platforms. But inside the cabin where Ethan sat once more, in seat 2A, there was only a silence stretched tight like a drawn wire, the kind of silence that arrives just before the earth itself cracks open. Samantha sat rigidly, her fingers interlocked so tightly they turned pale, as if every excuse she had rehearsed had finally abandoned her. Captain Reed maintained a calm exterior, yet the sweat trailing along his temples betrayed him, revealing what all three of them already understood. This situation had long surpassed the realm of a simple mishap. Olivia Brooks returned to the cabin with an expression twisted between panic and resolve. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "passengers are asking for an explanation. Some are sympathetic, but others are very upset. The press is already here. How should we respond?" Ethan rose, smoothing the front of his suit jacket, as though preparing to step into a congressional hearing. "We will tell the truth," he said. "Not the polished version." "The truth?" Olivia nodded sharply, then hurried off to coordinate preparations. Samantha swallowed her voice, barely audible, pushed out more by shame than breath. "Mr. Caldwell, are you going to fire us?" Ethan studied her for a long moment. "No. Firing does not solve the root of the issue." Samantha's eyes widened in disbelief. Ethan continued, "The problem is not an individual. It is an entire system that allows each wrong action to feel normal. Firing someone only creates a new enemy. It does not create change." Samantha lowered her head, her eyes glistening with an emotion she had not expected to feel. Not relief, but the sensation of being seen for the first time after years of functioning as a worn cog in an unquestioned machine. Captain Reed spoke next, his voice steady but heavy. "Then what is the next step?" Ethan looked at both of them, then answered. "We will show passengers that we are not hiding. We will learn from the truth, not bury it. But first, I need to speak with the passengers who chose to stay." Both of them nodded like soldiers receiving final orders before stepping into battle. The aircraft door opened. Harsh terminal light poured in, along with a tide of voices crashing like surf against a hull. Ethan stepped forward. No entourage, no assistant, no bodyguards. Just a man carrying authority, drawn from honesty, paired with a controlled anger that had purpose. The moment he appeared, the crowd fell silent for a brief heartbeat. Then conversations resumed with renewed intensity, but now tinged with respect. A middle-aged woman stepped forward, her voice gentle but resolute. "Mr. Caldwell, we heard what happened in the cabin. If it was discrimination, I stand with you." A bald man behind her added, "I saw part of it. They definitely treated you differently." Ethan did not answer immediately. He stepped onto the small platform airport staff had hastily assembled, surveyed the crowd, and began with a sentence that dropped into the space like a stone. "I did not ground this flight because I was treated disrespectfully. I grounded it because any one of you could be next." A wave of reactions rippled through the crowd. Ethan continued, "Today I flew as an ordinary passenger. No one knew who I was, and because of that, I saw the truest version of North Wind, from airport security, to the lounge, to the boarding gate, to the first-class cabin. And I must say this, that experience revealed a systemic problem, not an individual one." A hand rose. Emily Warren. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "I witnessed it from the beginning. You were questioned 4 times about your ticket. I have never seen that happen to anyone else." "Correct," Ethan nodded. "And when the duplicate seat error occurred, I was the one asked to move to a lower class, not the other passenger. Why no one dares to answer." The crowd began shifting from shock to indignation. A black man stepped forward. "I've been treated the same way on other airlines, but this is the first time I've seen a CEO refuse to let it slide." Ethan met the crowd with a steady gaze, his voice deep and commanding. "Today I am not using my position to claim seat 2A. I am using my position to demand change." A few claps broke out, then more, and soon the applause grew louder, surging across the gate area. But Ethan lifted a hand, signaling them to stop. "I do not want praise. I want accountability." He turned to Captain Reed, Samantha, and Olivia, standing only a few steps away, carrying expressions mixed with worry and remorse. "The entire flight crew has agreed to undergo mandatory bias and service training today. No one is being fired. Because I believe lasting change comes from repair, not removal." A reporter pushed forward with a microphone. "Mr. Caldwell, do you consider this racial discrimination?" Ethan did not flinch. "I consider this the outcome of unconscious bias, but the outcome is real and it causes real harm, and therefore it must be treated as a real issue." The crowd fell silent. His response neither softened the truth nor turned it into a witch hunt. It made clear that he was not fighting for himself alone. He was fighting for everyone. Olivia stepped closer and reported quickly, "The meeting area is ready. We can begin whenever you are." Ethan nodded, then raised his voice so the entire crowd could hear. "Those who wish to observe this process of change are welcome to stay. Those who prefer to leave will receive full support from North Wind, including rebooking compensation or hotel accommodations." A young woman stepped out of the crowd, eye shimmering. "Thank you for doing what so many of us do not have the power or the courage to do." Ethan bowed his head in acknowledgement. And in that instant he realized something profound. His actions were no longer about fixing a single flight. They were shaking the foundation of an entire culture. He turned back toward the aircraft, preparing to enter the hardest conversation of all, the one that mattered most. And as the door closed behind him, Ethan knew with absolute certainty what was happening here would not only transform Northwind, it would transform far more than that. The cabin door closed behind Ethan, and in that instant the air seemed to thicken, turning the luxurious interior of the Northwind aircraft into a refined interrogation room where every glance sharpened and every breath held the tension of people forced for the first time to confront themselves. Captain Reed flight attendant Samantha and 2 other crew members sat in a row before him, while Olivia stood nearby, with an expression torn between worry and hope. She had not directly caused the incident, but she understood that this was her moment to prove there were still people within Northwind who genuinely wanted change. Ethan stood before them, spined straight hands, lightly clasped, not projecting threat, but carrying the natural authority of someone who did not need to raise his voice to make others listen. A temporary screen rested on seat 1A, displaying Northwind's official training procedures, which he had requested Rebecca to send. "Let's begin," Ethan said simply. Yet the words struck Samantha like a sudden shock to an exposed nerve. "I want each of you to recount what happened today, not to justify yourselves, but to describe your thoughts honestly. And I will explain why those choices are dangerous in a service environment." Samantha lowered her head, her hair falling like curtains to hide the shame welling in her eyes. But Ethan recognized it was not an act. She was fighting herself. I thought Samantha began, her voice raspy. I thought I was protecting first-class standards. Our loyal passengers, they are usually demanding. They expect perfection. When I saw 2 men assigned to the same seat, my instinct was to assume Mr. Hale was correct. Because he was familiar. Ethan asked. And I was not. I did not know who you were. Her answer was painfully honest. Not wrong, but revealing a reflection of how thoroughly the system had trained her. Ethan nodded. "And because I was unfamiliar, you concluded the mistake must be mine." Samantha twisted her fingers until her knuckles turned white. "Yes, because I didn't look like the passengers you are used to serving." Samantha exhaled a broken breath, as though admitting it was already a sentence against herself. "Perhaps yes." A heavy silence filled the cabin, not a silence of judgment, but the silence that settles when truth is placed on an operating table. Captain Reed spoke next, his voice low but sincere. "Mr. Caldwell, I have flown for Northwind for more than 20 years. I admit I relied on habit. When Samantha reported the conflict, I assumed the platinum customer, Mr. Hale, should be prioritized. I did not check protocol. I did not check the booking timestamps. And I did not consider the role of bias." Ethan asked, "Do you recognize you stood with the familiar side, not the correct one?" "Yes," the captain answered immediately. "And it shames me." Ethan turned to Olivia. "And you, Brooks." Olivia lifted her chin, her voice steady with true leadership. "I take responsibility for not addressing these issues earlier, especially as Northwind has been criticized for its service for years. We assumed upgrading equipment, improving menus, and adding loyalty benefits was enough. But no one confronted the reality that the real issue lay at the foundation in attitudes. Ethan listened, feeling a deep ache rise within him. He had not come here to assign blame. He came to dissect an illness so old that the company had mistaken it for normal. "I do not require perfection from any of you," Ethan said slowly. "I require honesty first with yourselves." He lifted the tablet so they could see Northwind's official seat duplication protocol. The policy states that both passengers must be offered compensation or equivalent upgrades. Then the seat goes to whoever booked first. No line assigns priority to loyalty status. No line mentions appearance. Samantha stared at the document, perhaps for the first time, truly reading something she had been expected to know. "I did not know," she whispered. "Not that you did not know," Ethan replied gently, "but that you did not pay attention. Because you trusted your instincts over procedure." His words triggered something in her, not defiance, but awakening the dawning realization of how easily she had become a tool of a flawed system. At that moment, Olivia stepped back inside, speaking softly. "Mr. Caldwell, more passengers have gathered. Some want a full explanation. Local news reporters are outside as well." Ethan inhaled deeply. "Good. It is time to bring this into the light." Samantha startled. You will speak to the media?" Ethan turned to her, his gaze stern but fair. "Do you believe something like this should be hidden, or should it be acknowledged so it never happens again?" Samantha lowered her head. Captain Reed rose. "We will stand with you." Ethan walked out with them, and the bright terminal lights swallowed him again. But this time, he was more than the chief executive officer of Summit Capital. More than a wronged passenger. He was a voice for millions who had lived the same experience without the power to speak. When he reached the makeshift podium, more than 30 passengers waited, some holding their phones aloft, some holding their breath. Reporters pushed forward with microphones pointed like arrows ready to be released. Ethan did not evade. He did not mold the truth into a polished PR story. He spoke plainly, honestly, from the place of a man who had felt the sting of prejudice, and from a leader who understood the weight of actions that could reshape a company's history. "I grounded this flight," Ethan began, "because I witnessed a pattern of behavior. Not for the first time in my life, but for the first time inside a company I own." A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd. Cameras swiveled toward him. Ethan went on, "Bias is not always shouted. Most of the time it whispers." He touched the back of a nearby seat. "It lives in the extra second someone studies your face. In the question, 'Are you sure that is your first-class ticket?' asked 4 times in 2 hours. A black passenger nodded emphatically, struck by how clearly Ethan had voiced his own lived reality. Ethan continued, his voice resonant and steady like a slow drumbeat. "But today I am not standing here to reclaim Seat 2A. I am standing here to ensure no one else must prove they belong because of the color of their skin." The crowd erupted into applause, a wave of sound that felt like the release of long-held breath. A breakthrough, not in the aircraft cabin, but in the hearts of everyone listening. The cultural reckoning of Northwind had begun. And Ethan knew beyond any doubt that nothing could ever return to the way it was. The emergency training session lasted nearly 1 hour in the boarding lounge, guided remotely by the specialist Ethan had instructed Rebecca to connect with, and it forced the entire Northwind 218 crew to confront truths they had never considered: how even a single glance can become a weapon, how an unconscious assumption can wound someone deeply, how harmless habits can evolve into a quiet system of discrimination passed down through generations. And when the session ended, the atmosphere in the cabin had changed. No longer was it the tense air of people awaiting judgment, but the silence of individuals realizing they had been standing on the wrong side for far too long. Ethan stepped out of the aircraft doorway and saw passengers still gathered waiting for new instructions. Many had chosen to leave, but more than 2/3 had remained, unexpectedly forming a temporary community. Strangers bound together by witnessing a moment they knew would be retold for years to come. When Olivia announced North Wind 218 will begin reboarding with a new flight crew. Murmurs rose through the area, not in frustration, but in curiosity and hope. And when the replacement crew arrived, uniforms, crisp demeanor, professional faces, calm and bright, several passengers exhaled in relief. Ethan observed closely each greeting, each ticket scan, each look exchanged with a traveler. No glance lingered longer than necessary. No suspicion flickered in anyone's eyes. No voice dropped in tone. When it was Ethan's turn, the new attendant, a young man named Lucas, greeted him with perfect professionalism. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Caldwell. Your first-class seat is 2A. Wishing you a comfortable flight." A simple sentence, but it resonated in Ethan like the opening line of a new chapter. In the first-class cabin, Richard Hale no longer sat in his place. Instead, there was a peaceful stillness restored, as if no storm had ever passed through. When Ethan sat down, a man in seat 3C, Richard himself stood and approached, his expression awkward, yet sincere. "Mr. Caldwell." Ethan looked up, waiting. "I want to apologize." Richard inhaled deeply, as though unraveling knots in his chest. "Today made me realize I have lived inside a bubble of privilege for so long without noticing. I did not think I was wrong, but I was. Thank you for not ignoring it." Ethan nodded once. "I hope you bring this realization back to your company as well." Richard straightened. "I will. I promise." As he returned to his seat, Ethan watched him and understood something. Sometimes change does not require an explosion. Just one moment of awakening is enough. Emily entered the cabin next, offering Ethan a soft smile. "I suppose this trip to Denver will be far more meaningful than your meeting ever could be." Ethan smiled. "I believe so too." About 20 minutes later, when the first-class cabin had settled, the new captain, Captain Diane Morris, walked down the aisle. She bowed her head respectfully toward Ethan, her voice warm and genuine. "Mr. Caldwell, we are honored to serve you today. And thank you for doing what so many in this industry are afraid to do." Ethan met her eyes and saw not flattery, but the sincere respect of someone who understood the value of true change. "I only did what was right," he replied, "and I hope it helps create a culture pilots like you deserve." Captain Morris placed a hand over her chest, offering a deep nod before returning to the cockpit. As the aircraft pushed back and began taxiing, Ethan looked out the window and saw the Seattle afternoon light stretching across the runway, forming a long, glowing path like a new road opening before him. When the wheels lifted off the ground, Ethan felt a clarity he had rarely felt in all his years of leadership. A system can change if the person at the top is willing to touch what others avoid. No shouting, no violence, only truth and resolve. When the plane leveled into cruise altitude, Lucas returned with a glass of water, bowing slightly. "If you need anything at all, sir, please let me know." Ethan smiled, accepted the glass, and in that quiet moment recognized that this flight was not simply carrying him to Denver. It was carrying North Wind toward a better version of itself, a version worthy of existing. The plane continued toward the horizon, carrying not just passengers, but an entirely new future, one in which service would no longer be measured by appearances, but by respect. And in Ethan's heart, a single thought echoed, simple yet powerful: this is only the beginning. When Ethan stepped off the plane in Denver, his phone buzzed non-stop with dozens of messages from legal teams, PR executives, board members, and even friends in the finance world who had already heard about the Northwind 218 incident only hours after it happened. The media storm had officially erupted, a black CEO grounding an entire flight over discriminatory treatment. But what caught Ethan's attention was not the chaos, it was the reaction of the public. Most people supported him. Passengers from the flight had uploaded clips of his speech at the boarding gate, sharing their own experiences and expressing admiration for an action they knew was unprecedented. But Ethan refused to let himself be distracted. He still had a crucial meeting with Arcadia Tech. When he entered the sleek conference room atop a gleaming tower in downtown Denver, 12 pairs of eyes from Arcadia's leadership team turned toward him with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Arcadia's chairman, Marcus Layton, stood to greet him, shaking his hand with a wide grin. "Ethan, you just woke up the entire aviation industry." Ethan returned a faint smile. If it fell asleep on injustice, then it needed to wake up. Marcus laughed, the kind of genuine laugh rarely heard among people accustomed to masking their emotions. The meeting went smoother than anyone predicted. Ethan's decisive, transparent handling of the Northwind crisis made the negotiation table see him not merely as a financial strategist, but as a leader reshaping standards. The deal was signed within 2 hours, and when the final documents were stamped, Ethan recognized that this was not just a victory for Summit Capital, but proof that doing the right thing did not hinder success. It strengthened trust. On the way back to the airport, Ethan reviewed the social media posts flooding the internet. A video of Captain Reed's apology was spreading rapidly. A young passenger had written, "This is the first time I've seen a CEO stand up for us, not stand above us." Then there was Emily's message. Change begins when someone refuses to stay silent. Today that was Mr. Caldwell. Tomorrow it could be any one of us. Ethan read every word, not allowing pride to cloud his thinking, but accepting it as a reminder that his responsibility now stretched far beyond being a CEO. When he returned to Seattle, reporters were waiting, microphones raised high, but Ethan said only one sentence: "I am not seeking praise. I am seeking improvement. Northwind will change, and I will ensure that happens." After an emergency meeting at Northwind headquarters, he issued sweeping reforms: mandatory retraining for all frontline employees, creation of an independent customer oversight division, restructuring of hiring protocols, and a new initiative called the Caldwell Protocol, requiring every department to reassess each customer touchpoint to eliminate unconscious bias. But Ethan did not stop there. 1 week later, he called the entire Northwind 218 crew, from Captain Reed to Samantha to Olivia, into a private meeting. Reed entered the room looking humble, nothing like the authoritative figure he had been in the cabin days earlier. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, "thank you for not firing us. I learned more in that training session than in over 20 years of flying." Samantha stepped forward next, sincerity written across her face. "I've spent the whole week thinking about what you said. I didn't realize how many people I might have hurt without meaning to, but I want to do better. I want to start over." Ethan looked at them and, for the first time, allowed himself a genuine smile. Real change begins the moment you are willing to face yourselves. The meeting ended with collective relief. For many of them, it felt less like a disciplinary hearing and more like a release. 2 weeks later, when Ethan boarded another Northwind flight as an ordinary passenger, no one recognized him. No lingering stares, no extra questions, no suspicion about his first-class ticket. Every staff member followed the new protocols, and Ethan felt something settle gently in his chest when the attendant smiled and said, "Wishing you a wonderful flight, sir. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to let me know." A simple sentence, but it carried the meaning of an entire transformation. As the plane glided above the clouds, Ethan leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes, letting himself fully absorb one undeniable truth: real change is never created by rules alone. It begins with the courage of a single action, an action that forces an entire system to look at itself. And sometimes, all of it begins because of one seat marked 2A. From the perspective of an expert in organizational culture and the psychology of power, Ethan Caldwell's story is clear proof that lasting change does not come from polished speeches or glamorous PR campaigns. It begins the moment a person dares to confront injustice in front of them and chooses to use their position to break apart structures that have stood unchallenged for far too long. Ethan was not reclaiming a seat, he was reclaiming the standard of dignity owed to every human being who steps onto an aircraft. True power is not measured by a title, but by how it is used to protect the dignity we all share. If this journey moved you, please like the video to help spread the message and subscribe to follow more stories of those who choose to create change. Before you go, leave a comment with the phrase "Te Joy Ngai" as a reminder that each of us can begin transformation through the actions we take today.